Oral questions by members.
Member Prince George Vilmont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, the Federal Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations was asked repeatedly if the Coastal GasLink project will proceed. In fact, she refused to answer the question, and she said that it was up to BC's Minister of Indigenous Relations to deal with any unresolved issues related to the project proceeding. So today, can the Minister explain to this House and to British Columbians exactly what he has committed to do to ensure the project moves forward and the blockades come to an end?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. And I also want to commend the Minister for the work he was doing on behalf of all British Columbians over the weekend in the territory of the Wet'suwet'en people, starting in Smithers. It was, I would say, without any doubt, a historic discussion about rights and title that take us back to the 1990s and the court ruling on Delgamuukw Gisdaywa. And we took that forward to talk about rights and title specifically because that was the root of the challenge we have with respect to the coastal gas proposal through the territory. The project is being built, it's fully permitted, and it will proceed. The issues around rights and title, the issues around hereditary versus elected are issues that we all know need to be addressed by the Wet'suwet'en people. We have initialed with the hereditary leaders a document that will advance those issues. They are taking that back to their clans and their houses to have a full dialogue with all of the Wet'suwet'en people as they should, and I believe this is an important step forward. With respect to the project, as I said, it's fully permitted, it's underway, and it will be completed.
Prince George Vilmont on a supplemental.
Well, thank you very much. And while I appreciate the Premier's comments about rights and title, I think it's fair to say that British Columbians expected that any agreement that came as a result of negotiations would result in an end to the blockades and a clear path forward for the Coastal GasLink project. But the fact of the matter is, we simply do not know the details of what the Minister has agreed to. So again, to the Minister, what specific actions has he agreed to that will ensure the blockades end and that the Coastal GasLink project can move forward without delay?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. All parties found a pause opportunity so that discussions could take place. Again, I want to take the Minister and members and the public back to the beginning of the challenges with respect to rights and title, with respect to court rulings over many, many, many decades. The Delgamuukw Gisdaywa decision was not a conclusion for the Wet'suwet'en people. It was the beginning of a path forward. We, as a government, working with the federal government, sat down over the course of a number of days and put in place an agreement that's been initialed by all parties and is out for ratification within the Wet'suwet'en territory. With respect to the Coastal GasLink pipeline, the LNG Canada completion plant in Kitimat, all of those issues are fully permitted and fully underway. The injunction that was sought by Coastal GasLink was upheld by the courts, and the process will run its course. I don't believe it would have been appropriate for us to say that we were going to go to Wet'suwet'en territory and tell some individuals that to have a different point of view. We have talked in this House about dissent, lawful dissent, and that is an appropriate part of our democratic institutions. The project is permitted, the project is underway, it's employing thousands of British Columbians, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and it's going to be a net benefit for all BC when it's completed.
Member Richmond Queensborough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The past month has been incredibly disruptive to people just trying to get on with their lives. People's daily lives and our economy need to get back to normal as well, Mr. Speaker. The question everyone wants answered is a simple one to the Premier of this province. Is there anything in the agreement that will bring the protests and blockades to an end?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And again, there are no obstructions to economic activity or to citizens beyond the gathering on the front steps of the legislature, which, from my personal experience, has been going on for at least the 30 years I've been hanging around this place and long before that. It's our view.
Members.
It's our view that the objective was to go forward. This project is underway. It's been approved and ratified. It's going to be completed. Where we want to be when it comes to rights and title with respect to the Wet'suwet'en, and where we want to be to have a better understanding of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is forward-looking. How do we find a way forward so that we determine, let Indigenous people determine who represents them within that context, so that investment has a clear path, so citizens have a clear path, and political parties have a clear path as well. That was the objective. Mission accomplished with respect to rights and title. There was not, at any time, any objective to go in and convince people to have a different point of view. We had a frank discussion. There was disagreement. The project will proceed. Dissent is appropriate. Unlawful dissent is not.
Richmond Queensborough on a supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we'd all like to celebrate a solution, and I think we all feel here that the public deserve an answer. Federal and provincial representatives, including the Premier, said we have an agreement. We've listened to First Nations leaders, some First Nations leaders, say that's not the case. Caught in the middle of this are, of course, taxpayers. Their expectation of government is that government must maintain peace, order, and good government. At the end of the day, we are seeing the opposite of that in the last 3 to 4 weeks, Mr. Speaker. British Columbians have been stuck in traffic for one of the major intersections here in Vancouver. They've been stranded in the West Coast Express a couple of times. Mums and dads having to rush home to pick up their kids from daycare because the West Coast Express was shut down. Our economy relies on railways to move people and goods at the end of the day. We have seen temporary layoffs, Mr. Speaker, and that impacts people who have rents and mortgages to pay. So the Premier has not answered the fundamental question. Did the government receive any assurances that protests and blockades will end?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And again, we had full and frank discussions between the two orders of government and the Wet'suwet'en people represented by their hereditary leadership. That was a fulsome discussion on a whole range of issues, including Coastal GasLink. And I appreciate that the member from the opposition wants to continue to have tension and acrimony within the community. We disagree with that. We disagree with that. And a better way forward would be to allow the Wet'suwet'en to use their traditional wigas, their respectful discussions, which is what took place over the past 4 days, within their own territory to come to a conclusion on the important issues of rights and title and how they look outward at the world going forward with respect to investment, with respect to how they deal with their neighbours, with respect to how they deal with all British Columbians. That's where we're at, Honourable Member. That's the progress that was made. The project is permitted. The project is underway. The project will be completed. Is dissent part and parcel of our democratic institutions? Yes, it is. Is it sometimes an irritant for citizens? Absolutely. Is that appropriate? I don't think so. We'll take it up from there day by day.
House Leader, third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The Victoria Sexual Assault Clinic is an integrated medical and police facility built by VSAC in collaboration with the Forensic Nurse Examiners, Island Health, local police, and RCMP. It was designed by the people who respond to those crimes for efficiency and effectiveness, and it allows survivors to access both departments at once. Since opening, their team has diverted hundreds of people from the ER and doubled the number of people accessing preventative medication, medical care, counseling services, victim service support, and it has increased rates of police reporting. In the process of providing better care, they are saving the government approximately $1,370 each time they treat someone at the clinic instead of that person going to the hospital. It has proven, both medically and fiscally, to be the best model for responding to sexualized violence. What they are lacking, also because of their integrated model, is stable funding. Through you, Honourable Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Finance. The clinic submitted a funding model proposal for Budget 2020 so that their work can continue and so that other communities in BC can open clinics on their own. Despite the overwhelming demand for their services, they were on the verge of closing this year. They cannot continue to rely on donations to provide services that should be the government's fundamental responsibility. Why did the minister choose not to fund this proposal?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. And I think all of us in this House will stand united to deal with the issue of violence against women in our communities. And I have to say the Victoria Sexual Assault Centre has done extraordinary work in their integrated model that they hope not only will provide a model for Victoria, but will in fact provide a model for the rest of the province. Last year they were provided with a grant for 2 years, $200,000 over 2 years. They're now in the second year of that grant. That helps cover the operating costs for the clinic while they continue to undertake the work to ensure its long-term sustainability, and I expect that a proposal will come forward in this coming year.
House Leader, third party on a supplemental.
Well, I recognize that the minister identifies that we stand united. However, standing united is not the same as providing stable funding, which is what this clinic needs in order to be able to be a model for clinics across this province. The costs of sexual assault are astronomical. For BC, short and long-term medical care is $14.1 million. Lost productivity and opportunities for survivors, $27.1 million. Cost to employers and social services, $8.94 million. We are paying more to provide worse care. As the Select Standing Committee on Finance and Government Services wrote, sexual assault rates in our province continue to rise, and proper care immediately following an assault can substantially reduce the long-term costs. So, Honourable Speaker, I want to start with what are the basics of responsibility. Through you, my question is to either the Minister of Health or the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General. Given the overlap of interaction between health and justice in cases of sexualized violence, which one of these ministers is taking responsibility for this file?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and through you to the member. So the funding is distributed through the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Branch, which is in the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General. That's where the funding comes from. And I appreciate the comments that the member has made about the extraordinary work done by the Victoria Sexual Assault Centre. There's also prevention funding that comes through that ministry. We provide annual funding to support 400 programs and services to support victims of sexual violence. We increased funding for violence against women programs by an additional $5 million a year. And in this year's throne speech, as the member will know, our government also announced plans to provide 5 days of paid leave for people fleeing domestic violence. So we certainly are going to continue to look because we know there's more to do. And as I said, I certainly expect that we'll see a proposal come forward from Victoria Clinic as well.
House Leader for the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The public has watched as blockades and protests have significantly damaged the Canadian economy and, of course, had impacts on the daily lives of commuters and others, including the employment of individuals around this country. In particular, in British Columbia, though, they awoke to hear that there was a deal that had been reached with the Wet'suwet'en, and I'm sure that they felt, as we did, that they would like to believe that this agreement would resolve the matter of blockades and those impacts on our economy and on people's daily lives. But nevertheless, questions arise. In the release that was put out between the federal, provincial, and Wet'suwet'en spokespeople, I quote, "All parties at the table recognize that the differences relating to the CGL project remain." And then today, Molly Wickham, a governance director with the Office of the Wet'suwet'en, said, and I quote, "We're not standing down. We're not asking other people to stand down. They're willing to talk about title, but they don't understand that this is not over. We're still in the middle of a crisis." The public wants certainty. People whose jobs are on the line want certainty. Does this agreement provide that certainty?
Minister, Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thanks to the member for the question. As the Premier has stated repeatedly, the project itself is permitted, it's approved, it's underway. It has always been our expectation that Coastal GasLink will work closely with hereditary chiefs to ensure that they explore all possible ways to address concerns, Honourable Speaker. Everyone at the table recognizes the differences relating to this CGL project remain. Honourable Speaker, the lack of progress on rights and title is the key issue that led us to this place. And members opposite should well know that. They were in government for 16 years, and there was no work done. I'm not placing the blame there, but on addressing rights and title issues since 1997 Delgamuukw-Gisdaywa decision. We have made a historic movement in a very cooperative way. The work that we did do, Honourable Speaker, was done. It was done in camera. It was confidential, and with respect to the Wet'suwet'en people, this will be brought back to the Wet'suwet'en people. Their protocols in their clan system must be respected. We can't talk about the details of what we discussed until that happens, again, with respect to the Wet'suwet'en people. But I would note that Chief Was, in yesterday's press conference yesterday morning, he called for respect from everyone. And I called for space, room, to actually let this good work proceed. And Honourable Speaker, I would hope that is the desire of everyone in this House. Let's let this process proceed, Honourable Speaker, with respect. Those that have been raising issues around Wet'suwet'en rights, title, they know now that we are addressing those issues that have been outstanding for 23 years, and we should all be supportive of that work. Thank you.
House Leader for the Official Opposition on a supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With respect to the work on rights and title, of course, that is something that has been going on across Canada for many generations, and I assume will continue to go on. And we've heard in the announcement that there are ongoing discussions and ongoing process that will be engaged in with the Wet'suwet'en people around rights and title. But with respect to Coastal GasLink, the Premier, the Minister, can repeat that the project is approved and it's permitted. It was approved and permitted when all the protests and blockades first erupted. And in spite an injunction, they still were not able to proceed. It didn't resolve the matter, and certainly they were not able to proceed. There was hope, I believe, that when a deal was announced, that it would in fact pave the way for Coastal GasLink to be able to proceed unhindered and for blockades and protests to stop. But we are hearing different messages from the Wet'suwet'en leadership, the leadership of the hereditary chiefs in any case. And one of the quotes today reads as follows: "The Wet'suwet'en are waiting to get updates from the BC government and their talks with Coastal GasLink. What happens in those talks impact everything. We should have a report on their progress in the next 2 days for sure." It's clear from quotes like this, and there are others out in the media, that government has committed to some kind of a process with Coastal GasLink. Unclear why they would do that if there isn't some kind of change proposed. And yet we are left in the dark as to what those talks may contain. So again, to the Minister, can you please describe for us what kind of a process the government is engaged in with Coastal GasLink, and will it in fact allow them the certainty that they will proceed unhindered and that the public will not be subjected to more blockades and protests as a result?
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. And we had 3 days, 3 nights of very intense discussions, very respectful discussions, and as part of that, there were several questions that were raised regarding the project. I did commit to providing the information they had requested, information about the project for them in a timely manner. And that is, I'm in the process of providing, of getting the answers to some questions for them, some informational questions.
Member Kamloops North Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we so far seem to be getting more answers around the rights and title. And I'm just going to read from the joint statement on the discussions that was released by the government Sunday, March 1st, so yesterday. These talks focused on two separate topics: the recognition of the Wet'suwet'en rights and title throughout the Yintah, the territory, and the issues arising out of the Coastal GasLink project. The topics were discussed separately, and we understand that on this side. Our questions are primarily around the Coastal GasLink and the protests and the blockades that have been happening. It was permitted, it was approved, it was underway on Wednesday, it was on Thursday as well when the minister went up. It still is today, but I think public expectation, Mr. Speaker, throughout this whole process has been that the reason the minister and the federal minister went up on Thursday to have these discussions was around the blockades and the impacts it was having to the local, the provincial, and the federal economies out there. And that's what the expectations, I think, the general public had around this. So I think we can even understand to some degree that perhaps the rights and title agreement that's been struck, which by their own release is separate, may stay in camera for the next week or two. But again, what was put into any agreements, if any, or any changes, if any, around the Coastal GasLink project, and what assurances did the government get, if any, around the Coastal GasLink blockades and disruptions that we're seeing in our economy as a result? Because that seemed to be the driver for government to go up in the first place. As the minister has said, this has been an outstanding rights and title issue for 23 years. He didn't just wake up Thursday morning and decide that was the day to go up there. It was the blockades interrupting the economy that drove him up there.
Minister, Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Again, thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I also want to thank the member for the question. Everyone at the table that we where we met in Smithers, everybody at the table recognized the differences relating to the Coastal GasLink project remain. Those differences remain. Honourable Speaker, when we concluded our discussions, at least for the time being, yesterday we stated publicly, Chief Was stated that it's important that we proceed with respect. I also added to that it's important that we are given the space, both levels of government, the Wet'suwet'en people, to do the work that needs to continue, Honourable Speaker. I think that message is loud and clear, and the right to peaceful protest is something that we all should respect, but more than that, and defend in this House, Honourable Speaker. The right to illegal activities is not condoned, I would think, again, by everyone in this House. And I think that was made clear as a result of our discussions, Honourable Speaker.
Member Kamloops North Thompson on a supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess we'll try this tack then. I guess we know there's an agreement that needs to be ratified, and it will be ratified through the Houses and traditional processes. We have our own ratification processes down in this House as well. So when will we know what the government has pledged to do? Will it be brought to the legislature? And what exactly within the agreement is the ratification process the government's committed to for the government to make it official?
Minister, Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. So the process as stands, Chief Was estimated that it may be up to 2 weeks to bring the clan protocols together, the work that will be done in the communities, bringing together. My expectation is all clans in the 5 clans within the Wet'suwet'en Nation the work that they will do will inform whether I believe that my hope is that they will endorse the work forward on the arrangement that we've made. Our hope is also that that will stay confidential until the Wet'suwet'en people have the chance to do that good work. And my expectation is that following that, Minister Bennett and myself will return to the territory to sign the agreement. It will be certainly it will be made public at that point in time.
Member Abbotsford West.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, who did the government negotiate this agreement with? And is it the government's view today that that group with whom this agreement was negotiated is representative, definitively representative of the Wet'suwet'en people?
Minister, Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. That we met with the Office of Wet'suwet'en, that's the hereditary chiefs that are covered in that organization, Honourable Speaker. They will, the agreement, however, it was initialed by the chiefs, as it was by Minister Bennett and myself, but with respect to the processes and the protocols of the Wet'suwet'en people, that will be brought back to the Wet'suwet'en people. This agreement will go through the system of representation through the clan system under their governance protocols for the discussion and endorsement. And I expect, but that is to be organized by the Office of Wet'suwet'en, Honourable Speaker. But the process within the nation itself, I expect that will include everyone in the community. That's the expectation. The elected chiefs. The 5 elected chiefs in council, as you know, have benefit agreements on the project that we've been discussing. But everybody will be involved with Wet'suwet'en as per their protocols and processes. And I would ask that we all leave the time with respect to the Wet'suwet'en people for that process to happen. And I look forward to, my hope is that we will be able to endorse a process and a framework forward, helping government and the Wet'suwet'en people move finally, after 23 years, to clarity on governance and issues of rights and title that have been so long overdue. That, Honourable Speaker, will bring not just more predictability and certainty for the Wet'suwet'en people, but for the entire region and for the entire province of this great province. Thank you.
Member Abbotsford West on a supplemental.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I think perhaps the frustration, if that's the correct term, stems from the following. I've been listening and reading carefully what the government has had to say about this agreement. Words like momentous, historic. I've been trying to path forward, and I've been trying to reconcile that with some of the statements we've heard from others. We heard them earlier about how this doesn't in any way, shape, or form address the question of blockades and disruption that has taken place across the country. And the minister and the government seem to be saying that this historic, momentous agreement, which apparently has been committed to paper in some way, shape, or form, is not available for British Columbians and Canadians to scrutinize. There is a long-standing tradition in this chamber that when agreements of the magnitude that the government is assigning to this one would be viewed, seen, scrutinized by British Columbians via this chamber. And it seems to be the minister and the government's view that in this instance that will not take place. An agreement that apparently does everything but resolve the issues of blockades and disruptions will remain secret. Can the minister provide certainty, if that is the government's position, that British Columbians will not see this agreement while others engage in separate processes, Or is he prepared to say to British Columbians, we believe in this agreement, we think it is momentous, we think it's historic, and we will release it so that British Columbians can scrutinize it?
Minister, Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I'm not sure how to respond to that. The long-standing practice, I would suggest, is 16 years of failing to address the rights and title issues of the Wet'suwet'en people. Honourable Speaker, and everyone should know in this House that the failure to address those issues of rights and title following the Delgamuukw stay-away decision is the root cause for the situation we find ourselves in right now. So I would hope that the opposition would be pleased that a government is finally addressing the issues that took us to this place. So, and I would ask them again to have respect for the Wet'suwet'en people's process. They have the right to bring an arrangement that we've been working on in coordination with the federal government, our partners, Minister Bennett, and to be allowed the time and the space to be brought to the Wet'suwet'en people so that they can come together in a united way, not a divisive way that seems to be the process the other side want us to go into. This is about trying to bring together the Wet'suwet'en people in an agreement that can help address the root causes that got us to this place. And please, I ask everyone who's watching today, everyone who cares about rights and title for Wet'suwet'en people, we have a process that's been agreed to by the Office of Wet'suwet'en, and they're taking it to their people. Let's let that happen, and don't try to divide everybody throughout this process. Let's bring calm and space for the good work to happen.